Oh my God, it's a giant. Bro, there's just no way that just happened right now. Hey guys, what's going on? We've got a CutCarryCast Podcast, episode 4, and we have a special guest today, a buddy of mine, Luke Johns. We actually used to fish in the same high school bass fishing club, and I'm really excited to talk to him. He's got a lot going on, a lot of cool things, really positive face for the sport of bass fishing right now, and I think a lot of you young guys are going to learn some stuff from our conversation, and we actually got him on the line here, so we're going to go ahead and give him a little round of applause and introduce Mr. Luke Johns. What's going on, Luke? How's it going?
What's up? It's going great. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I know you've been out doing some cool stuff this week, doing some fishing. I've been looking at your Instagram. What's been going on with that?
Yeah, I was actually just up at Clear Lake this week. I was fishing with a brand probably a little bit less known to a lot of the United States guys or California guys called Whiplash Factory. They're based out of Japan, just trying to kind of break into the U.S. market. So I actually got hired to film a video up on Clear Lake up there with one of my buddies, Chad Schweitzer, and then our film guy was Sean Sullivan. So we'll be putting out a full YouTube video on this and expect a bunch of other content on, all the social media platforms to come soon. And we had a good time. I mean, we caught quite a few fish. Their baits are hard bait focused right now. I think they have one soft bait that they do, but right now for the U.S. market, they've got a glide bait, a jerk bait, and then like 5 different topwater baits. And we smoked them up on Clear Lake on them, and it was fun. I've never done something in that realm where it's kind of outside of the tournament stuff, just like more promotional, content-y, like in a really professional way. So it was a really cool experience for me.
No, I mean, that sounds pretty awesome. Did you have any dudes actually from Japan that came out, or was it more just like their liaison people out here in the States?
Yeah, no, they don't have anybody out here in the States. So yeah, these guys, 2 guys came over from Japan. Their names Yuji and Tatsu. And so they made the trip all the way over from Japan. And, we took them out on Clear Lake for a couple days, hung out up there, and it was awesome. I met them through work. I know we're going to get into this probably a little bit later, but I work for Fisherman's Warehouse and the brand that we recently brought on. So we had met them through that, and then they kind of learned about my bass fishing stuff. And anyways, they wanted to, further promote their brand over here. So they kind of took that extra step into filming a video with us.
Well, that's probably the one lake that no matter what part of the country or world you're in, that's a place that we're going to want to visit, the Bass Factory, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, it was tougher conditions than normal. Normal Clear Lake, you're smashing 30 pounds. I mean, not everybody, but it's a good day. You catch 30 pounds. It was a little bit tougher than that, but still caught a ton of quality fish. And it was just one of the funny things was these guys, like I said, they're from Japan. They normally fish Lake Biwa. That's their closest lake to them. And I asked them like what a good day of bass fishing on Biwa was. And they were literally like, maybe getting like 1 bite a day is like a good day. Like most guys, they said in like a tournament setting, if you had 100 boats, 50 of the guys would blank, 50 guys would, catch a fish, 2 fish, or maybe 3 fish. And that was like kind of it. So they were like, this is the best bass fishing they'd ever seen. So it was pretty cool.
Wow, we're gonna have some people moving over here soon and moving to Clear Lake. I think after their trip on the lake. Hey, so we'll circle back. I want to get a little more information about Clear Lake a little bit later. But I think something important to bring up is talking a little bit about your backstory and kind of where you started. I think it's a pretty unique story, and just kind of starting where we met, which is the club you started. So maybe we can just talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So, for those of you that don't know, I started the Vista del Lago High School Fishing Club back in, I think it was 2014 when I was a freshman. And it was kind of just a little bit of a pipe dream for my young self wanting to get into tournament bass fishing at the time when I was kind of very green on everything. But I had heard about tournament bass fishing, heard about the high school avenue, and I realized that's, the easiest step in for me. So I decided I would kind of take it upon myself, obviously with the help of a lot of people, especially my mom. She worked up at the school, so she was our club advisor, and she put in a lot of work too. But we started the high school fishing club up there, and it kind of bloomed over the next couple of years into this, really cool club that had a lot of people in it. Obviously, you came through that club and just met a ton of really cool people that way, and really got to dip my feet into tournament bass fishing and get my start on it. And that's really the time where I kind of fell in love with the tournament scene. Like I said, I had never really fished tournaments before that. So I kind of had no clue what I was really getting into, other than I knew I wanted to compete and do something that kind of led my bass fishing stuff into a more competitive avenue. So it was a really cool experience, and I'm proud to say the club's still running. I'm not very involved with it anymore, but every now and then I get to go back and speak to the fresh round of high school kids that are in there. So it's been a really cool experience to watch that thing continue on. Gosh, I mean, it's been 7 years since I graduated, and it's still going, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely really appreciate you starting that club, and I think for myself it was really big in actually getting me access to that world, because I'm kind of like a solo fisherman in my family. I didn't really have anyone doing anything for me in that regard. So, for those of you guys that don't know, right? I mean, we would have boaters that would take us out, and basically these older dudes would volunteer their time to take us fishing for these tournaments, because we couldn't be operating these boats or whatever. And for me, at least, that was my kind of like mentorship and opportunity to like learn how to bass fish, learn about certain lakes, get taken around in a boat, because that wasn't something that I had. So that was something I really took from the club. And I think that something that I think I'd like to talk to you about is just, I know that you had some success in the actual high school scene with FLW, and kind of talk us through like some of your tournaments that you had in high school, and then kind of your progression into college. And it seems to me, at least on the outside, that there was kind of like a push straight from high school, maybe jumping into fishing as a pro. I don't know how much time you actually spent in that like college time frame.
Yeah. So we'll start from the beginning in the high school stuff. Yeah, I went into that first year, like I said, pretty green on the whole tournament side. I was also at the same time fishing a Pro-Am. It was a shared weight circuit out here. It's no longer around, but it was called CTT, California Tournament Trail, and I fished as a co in that. So kind of doubling down, getting experience out of the back of the boat and doing the high school stuff. Had some lucky kind of very early success in the high school rank. I won the high school state championship on the Delta my first year as a freshman. And that put us into the regional championship. And we ended up coming up 1 ounce short in that regional championship, which if we won it, we would have gone to nationals. And that was back in the time where the FLW high school, which is, now the MLF stuff, but that was back when that high school national championship was like something you really had to work hard to qualify for. You had to basically be, I think they only took like 20 or something teams to that national championship back then, that first year that I fished. So it was kind of sad to come up and out short, but that was one of the things I learned very on in my fishing career too, is you got to learn how to lose, whether it's, the nail biting 1 ounce that you miss by, or it's, you get your teeth stomped in and, come in last place. You got to learn how to take those blows and move on. But moving on from that, kind of went through the rest of my high school career fishing those. And then, like I said, that shared weight Pro-Am, really just trying to absorb as much information as I could and try to, I was watching YouTube videos all the time, studying, fishing as much as I could, in between being a high school student. And I have to give a huge thank you to my parents. That was, like I said, a freshman, couldn't drive back then. I did buy myself a boat based off of, birthday and chore money back then. It was just like a little tiny, I think it was called a Rinker Built, but it was like a fiberglass boat, kind of aluminum shape, or, what that kind of deep V aluminum shape would be. It was like 13 feet with a little like 25 horse on the back. And my dad would tow me all over the place and let me fish for the whole day. But yeah, so worked my whole way through high school, kind of upgraded boats in the meantime, fished all those tournaments for CTT. And then at that point, obviously kind of graduate high school, had gone back to, actually at the very end of high school, I went back and did get to fish the nationals finally my last year. And that was a really cool experience back on Pickwick Lake. Didn't end up winning or anything crazy like that. That was really cool to go bass fish back east somewhere. We were on like Pickwick in Alabama. And so did that. And then once I got out, it was obviously kind of had to pick where I was going to go after that. Did I want to just go kind of straight into, not necessarily the pro side, but did I want to fish more team tournaments? Did I want to fish more pro-ams and try to work my way up to the front of the boat? Or at that time, my other option was when Wild West was going on out here, they actually started a college series my freshman year of college. And the really cool thing that Wild West did back then for their college series was they allowed you to fish as a team with anybody from any other college school. So a lot of people are used to the MLF and the Bass series where you have to have like a club set up at your school. You got to jump through all these hoops. You can only fish with people from your own school. And then you also have to deal with, the school politics side where you have to, sign off on, your insurance and making sure everything's covered and blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of just a huge pain. So Wild West did this thing where it was basically like, hey, as long as you can prove you're in a college, you can come fish our tournaments and buddy up with your friend from Sac State or, Chico or, wherever it was. And I fished those with my buddy Luke Lipanovich, and I forget what college he was going to. He lives over in Napa somewhere, so totally different colleges. But we teamed up and had a really successful year that year. I think we took second in one of the events. We won another one, and then we ended up winning the championship for that. And that was really what kind of kick-started my pro side, because the prize package for the championship was, I think we won a power pole, a couple $100 cash. And then the big thing was they paid for our entries into the Wild West Pro-Ams as a co-angler. And at that time, I had really been tossing around the idea of fishing them as a co-angler already. And then when I got that, those entry fees already paid for, I kind of sat down and thought to myself, I might as well, go to the pro side. So I contacted Wild West and said, hey, would you guys be okay if I basically deducted those co-angler entry fees from my pro entry fee and then paid that difference of whatever it was? So it was like basically like fishing on the pro side for half the cost because, like I said, I'm a college student. I was working, but didn't have $800 or whatever those entry fees were at the time to just throw at a tournament series, especially being pretty new still, obviously, to the tournament scene. I'd fished a lot of tournaments, but never anything of that stature. So they were nice enough. They let me just cover the difference, and then I went straight into the pro side, and that was kind of how I got to the front of the boat.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. I think one of the things that's kind of fascinating about listening to your story and kind of how you got to where you are is it really is kind of like a self-made thing. I mean, like you said, working, saving money, you really kind of pushed yourself through. And I think for a lot of people on the outside looking in, this sport, $100,000 boats, all the electronics nowadays, I think a lot of people get discouraged that they just physically cannot afford to fish this sport. But for someone like yourself, I mean, your parents obviously supported you, but I think a lot of it was just emotionally supporting you in the fact of like showing up to your tournaments, like helping you like chase your dreams, giving you that advice that you needed. And then obviously because of some of the success you had, it actually allowed you to continue to progress through the sport. You didn't necessarily need to come from some crazy background where, your dad's just giving you $100,000 boat or something and you're going fishing.
Definitely. Yeah, that was like a really big thing for me was, all the just the support, not necessarily like financial support. I did end up paying for a lot of the stuff myself. Not to say they definitely helped me out with entry fees when I was in high school and stuff like that. But once I got out, I didn't, it was nice to not have to kind of lean on them for that. And I mean, that's one of the things that for anybody listening, I think the biggest thing that I would ever tell anybody, piece of advice, is always just to, take the like stair step approach, which is what I tried to do, where don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think you have to buy the $100,000 boat because you definitely don't need it. Matter of fact, the boat that I run now, I paid $40,000 for. I'm not running a brand new boat even today by any means. it's so expensive to do this if you want to do it the lavish way. But if you don't have the money to do that, you can 100% compete against these guys. Up until I think I got this boat 2 or 3 years ago, I had fished out of the front of the boat in a 1996 Skeeter. I had upgraded some electronics on it, but, original motor, same boat. And, I still had a lot of success out of that thing. So it's definitely not the boat that catches the fish. It doesn't matter, what truck you're pulling up to the launch ramp in the morning. You just, as long as you can get there and you put in the time and the effort to actually have the success, then it'll follow.
No, for sure. And I think in the last podcast episode with Austin Wilson, that was something we talked about, was you guys kind of come from a similar space in the fact that you guys didn't always have the nicest equipment, the nicest boats, the nicest anything showing up at these tournaments. You really relied a lot on other aspects of the sport, which is obviously your knowledge, your experience, just being a fisherman, and obviously that support from your family and all that stuff is going to play such a big factor, much more of a factor, I think, than just having that expensive stuff.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I remember when I was fishing as a co-angler, I'd always want to draw the guy with the brand new nice boat. And the longer I got into it, I realized a lot of the guys that drive a nice boat are just, they're the retired guys that got extra money. And, no knock on them, but, they have the money to buy it. They don't necessarily take it that serious. But then I draw the guy whose boat looked like it, had sat in the sun for the last 10 years and just ragged. And those are the guys typically that, put in so much more time on the water, and they beat their equipment up. And that's why it looked like that. And those were the guys that I usually ended up having the best days with.
No, that's awesome. And I think, like you said, I mean, the dudes that are, running their boat against the dock day after day, night after night, spending time out there, those are the people that you want to be with.
It's a tool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to treat it like one. So
no, for sure. So I know, like you said, we've talked about Wild West quite a bit. They're not around anymore. What kind of tournament trail are you going to find yourself putting most of your time into going forward from here?
Yeah, right now I'm kind of splitting between 2 different trails that I'm running in. I do some of the Juan Basses. I don't fish all of them just because some of those are down in Arizona, and it's just too much time off with work between the other tournament series. So hop into a couple of those where I can. I've really enjoyed those. They're shared weight, so it's kind of a more fun event for me. And then the really serious ones that I fish are the BAM Pro Tour. So that's the Super 60. That's the other name for it. But those are really cool. Or it's a really cool tournament series. It's kind of similar to what Apex was as far as the style of it goes. It's you fish solo. It's a $2,500 entry fee, and you have to qualify to get into it. So I think we had like 69 guys signed up for it this year, and it's a little bit of an interesting format for your actual qualification for the last day. So they take 2 different categories. It's your best 5 fish weight, like a normal tournament, for 5 of the guys that qualify in the top 10. And then the other 5 guys are the guys who caught the most keepers over the first 2 days. And then on the final day, they throw those guys out there, top 10 go out, weights are zeroed, and then it just becomes a 1-day 5 fish shootout for the win. So those are a really fun series, and I mean it's a group of hammers that are fishing it this year for sure. So I've got my work cut out for me.
No, I mean that sounds awesome, and I'm curious to see what you think about this. But I haven't fished any of those tournaments with that format. But something I always thought was interesting, especially depending on the fishery you're at, the Delta, Clear Lake, maybe somewhere like Folsom, having those weights zero on the 3rd day really changes a lot. And I really think it shows you there's a lot more strategy that goes into it. And then also who's really sitting on fish and who's really finding those fish day after day, because, depending on where you're at the Delta, the tide's changing everywhere. Or maybe you're on a lake like Folsom or somewhere else where there's not just, Clear Lake bass reloading day after day. You really have to plan for that 3rd day, and you need to catch them. I mean, it's not like you can stick 30 pounds on your first day of the tournament and kind of ride that weight the rest of the time. You need to show up on that last day.
Yes, definitely. It's a really fun format that way. A lot of people have always asked me, they're like, what do you think about that format, the last day they zero out the weights? And I always tell everybody, I'm like, I love it when I'm not sitting in first place going into the last day. And honestly, I don't know if I've ever sat in first place going into the last day on one of those formats, but the point still stands. It's really cool when you get into that top 10 and then you realize that field is leveled and you just get to go out there. You know, it's a 1-day shootout. You already know what you got to do to get that win. And at that point, it's literally you against the fish. It's not trying to catch the guy who is ahead of you by a couple pounds or anything like that. It's literally just go out there, catch as much weight as you can, and see where the chips fall. And one of the other things, like you mentioned, that's really cool about it is the strategy of it, because you do have those. First of all, you have those two different qualification routes. You can either go for keepers or you can go for total weight. Now, a lot of the time, if you're catching a lot of keepers, you end up kind of catching that weight with it. So most of the times that I've had really good keeper counts, I end up doing what they kind of call it double qualifying, where you're qualified on both sides, so weight and keepers. Or if you're the guy who literally wants to go out and chuck big baits for 5 bites a day, you can do that. And the other really cool thing about it is we get to actually watch the leaderboard as the day progresses. So we're able to go on to Tourney X, which also anybody who's following along can watch Tourney X during the day and see where the weights are at and what guys are catching. But we can actually go on the water and see, okay, right now it's noon, I'm in 5th place and I'm, 3 pounds back from the leader. So I know I got to upgrade, or there's been times where I've been out there and I'm like, okay, I'm sitting in, 2nd place or whatever on the last day, and there's 4 hours left to fish. And I kind of do the math in my head to where 10th place is. And I go, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to make it no matter what, basically, unless 8 guys have a freak show day or freak show afternoon and smoke me. But it's nice then because you basically get to, kind of put your rods down and just go looking, go find new water. You get to run and practice and kind of set yourself up for that next day. So that's something that you'll notice a lot of the guys that are doing really good in those tournaments, the last half of the second day, you probably won't see them really catch any fish after that, because they're just going to go practice and basically gear up for day 3.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like something where you definitely have to think about it in advance. And I'm sure when you kind of switched to that format, that was probably a little interesting as far as working out all those bugs and kind of figuring out, because it was so new. As far as I know, there hasn't really been anywhere, any other tournaments that I've seen that's actually like the major format until recently. It seems like it's kind of being more adopted these days, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. And yeah, you can see the guys who don't strategize, and no offense to them, but you'll notice guys where like they blast them on day 1 and then they go out and catch them even better on day 2. And I've always thought, like, dude, what do you, like, no offense, but what are you doing, dude? Like, you got to put the rods down. It's fun swinging on them, but like, you're just burning fish at that point. So, I'm happy for the guys that do that, because they burn their fish up and give the rest of us a chance to catch them on day 3.
That's pretty funny. So, earlier we kind of mentioned it. We'll kind of circle back around. Obviously, in a way, right now your job is, you're tournament bass fishing and you're winning tournaments and you're successful. So I would say that, that is a job for you. But you also have another job that's really not that far outside of the space that you're already working in with your tournaments.
Yeah. So I work for Fisherman's Warehouse, sort of. I actually work for a company called Tackle Tech, and we're a wholesale distributor of fishing tackle. So we do distribute to Fisherman's Warehouse, work very closely with them. So that's why you see me on, some of the Fisherman's Warehouse videos, social media, and all that stuff. But on the Tackle Tech side, what I actually do for my regular day job, as we'll call it, I am the buyer for Tackle Tech. So in that role, I am basically in charge of, I think, somewhere roughly around 120 brands that we carry there for wholesale distribution, and work really closely with, all the major brands in the industry. And I'm kind of the, I guess you would call it, decision maker and purchaser of all of the tackle that comes through that place. So it's a really fun gig. I get to meet a ton of really cool people. like I said earlier when I was talking about Whiplash Factory, the opportunities like that have all came from that job. So it's really cool to be able to work inside the industry and something that I love and do that for a normal day job, and then build all these really cool connections with all these companies in the meantime.
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier too. You went to college, you graduated, you got a degree. Has that kind of helped you like in some of these environments? I don't know what your major was, but
Yeah, so I majored in marketing, so it's not necessarily like a direct application in the position that I'm in, but it's definitely helped for a lot of the things. I mean, especially obviously on the bass fishing side, the sponsorship side and stuff like that. I mean, what basically a bass fisherman is that's sponsored, they're a marketer. You're not, getting paid necessarily to go catch fish. You're getting paid to sell products, or that's why you're getting a discount on rods, or, whatever your sponsorship level is. It all depends on what you can give these companies in return as far as sales go. So that side has definitely been helped by the marketing side, but, it's helped a little bit in the job side, but I'm not in the, really the marketing department. So it's not a direct correlation.
no, for sure. I mean, talking about kind of some of your strengths, I do want to kind of touch on you. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but anyway, talk about your style of fishing is really what I'm trying to say. And I think it's really interesting when you look at some of your wins, right? We have a lot of guys where, hey, he always wins at Clear Lake. Hey, he's a Delta stick. He's winning at the Delta every single time. We take him to Shasta, we take him to Maloney's, he's going to fall off the leaderboards. Watching you, watching your fishing, I think it's been really interesting to see. I mean, you have wins on Folsom Lake, New Maloney's, the Delta, all over the place. Kind of talk about your strengths and why you do have those wins across vastly different bodies of water.
Yeah, when I was first getting into bass fishing, I really leaned into the finesse side of things, which worked great. That's a very consistent way to catch fish. You can catch quality fish doing it, but honestly, it can be a hard way to win tournaments just because you can't rely on getting those giant bites every day finesse fishing. There's times where tournaments set up perfect for that, and that's what you have to do. But the thing that I've really kind of prided myself on and tried to make myself the best at is just being a completely versatile fisherman. So, over the last couple of years, I've really tried to become as comfortable as I can, whether I have a drop shot in my hand or a flipping stick or a frog or a chatterbait or, anything else under the sun, because you never know what the conditions are going to throw at you. You're chasing a wild animal in its natural habitat, and one day it might want the chatterbait, and the next day it wants a weightless Senko thrown on its head. So I've really tried to just kind of develop every single corner of my game to give me, the best opportunity no matter where I show up. And I think that's kind of why it translates into those results, especially when you look at like you said, the difference in the fisheries of the places that I've done well on, whether it's the Columbia River or it's Clear Lake or the Delta or Folsom Lake. I mean, they're so vastly different. And if you are one of those guys that's stuck in the box, you're a Delta rat that throws a flipping stick and punching and frogging and chatterbaiting, and you try to go somewhere like Folsom, there's no mats to flip. So you got to pick up the spinning rod. And if you're not comfortable with it, it's hard to catch fish when you're not confident. So basically everything that I just said just kind of boils back down to being confident in myself, whether I have, the spinning rod in my hand or the bait caster, and no matter what's tied on the end, I feel like I can catch them on it.
No, I mean, that makes total sense to me. And I think especially something I touched on with Quinn and one of the other podcasts was just talking about like the versatility of West Coast bass fishermen and kind of the opportunities that we have out here as far as fisheries. We're not out in, the South or whatever, flipping a jig in some dirty lake and they all look the same. We really have like polar opposite fisheries, especially some of the trails that you mentioned going up into Oregon, up and down California, into Arizona sometimes, maybe Nevada for mead. They really are different fisheries, and you're going to all those places, so you have no choice but to adapt.
Totally. Yeah, this year I will have fished in Arizona, California, and then the border of Oregon and Washington and everywhere in between. So really, I mean, you have to be able to catch them in every single kind of condition, whether it's, a current fishery, a fishery where you can literally see 35 plus feet deep, like we were at Mojave. And then you roll up to Clear Lake and, you've got maybe a foot of visibility and you're fishing all grass. And it's a totally different ball game on almost every single one of these fisheries that we roll up to. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so much fun to fish out here, is because you're not just, running through the motions of the same kind of fisheries everywhere you go. Every single place you go to is a completely different puzzle that you have to put together. And like you said, it really breeds really versatile fishermen and guys that can just put together stuff on the fly, because there's nowhere else like it in the country.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to build on that further, and I want to hear a little bit more about your Clear Lake trip this week. So you're going out with a new company. Maybe this is the first time you fish their baits. Maybe it's not. Talk about kind of going out. You have some new guys that maybe you've never fished with before. You're using some baits maybe you're not familiar with. You're really having to apply yourself as a bass fisherman. Hey, I want to take these baits out here. I want to get some content. I want to get some videos. I also want these guys to catch fish. Kind of walk us through maybe a little bit of a report and kind of what that means for you.
Yeah. No, that's a great talking point, because that was something that I had never experienced in my fishing career, was going to a body of water and having to fish a very minimal selection of baits. Like I said, it was a jerk bait, a glide bait, and then a couple variations of top water. They were, walking baits, and then they had one small, like, kind of prop bait. And I actually ended up going up over the weekend, fish Saturday, Sunday, just to basically practice with their baits, try to find fish. That way, when we got up there for the shoot, which was on Tuesday, Wednesday, I was kind of dialed in. So I went up there on Saturday, got on the water, fished a couple areas in North Lake, didn't get a bite, and then went out onto one point, caught a 13-inch bass, and I fished. That was probably at 9 o'clock in the morning. I caught a 13-incher on the jerk bait, and I fished the rest of the day without ever getting another bite again. And it was starting to, like, really stress me out. I mean, I fished till 5 or 6 p.m. and I was kind of starting to freak out a little bit, like, geez, I need to, put this together. We got guys literally flying over from the other side of the world to go fishing and shoot content catching bass. And right now I've got a 13-incher to show for it if these guys had showed up today. So I was freaking out a bit. So day 2, I go out on Sunday, and it was basically a repeat of day 1, except I literally never caught a fish on Sunday. And I was kind of freaking out. So I drove home and ended up getting back up there Tuesday night, and we met up with the guys from Valley Hill or Whiplash. Valley Hill is another subset of their company, but with the guys from Whiplash, and kind of told them, I was like, look, it's a little bit tough on the lake right now. I didn't totally spill the beans of I only caught one fish over 2 days because I didn't want to freak them out. But I told them, I was like, look, it might be tough, so we'll see what we can do, and we'll go out and just fish. And thankfully, we had a pretty good day, or actually, really good day, especially by the standards of the weekend. We caught a handful of 3 to 5 pound fish throughout the day. And I think one of the things that really kind of makes the difference is just, it's basically just all comes down to relaxing and being confident in your abilities, because the more confident you are if you're fishing, the higher your likelihood of catching fish is. I don't know what it is. You could have 2 guys on the boat. They're throwing the exact same bait, working on the same. If one thinks he's going to catch them, he's going to catch them a lot better than the guy who's like, I don't think this is going to work today. I don't know what it is. The fish can feel it or whatever, but it was just a good environment. I hate this word, but the vibes were high with these guys from Japan. They were super excited. So it felt like all the pieces just kind of fell into place. And it was a really fun, it was very fulfilling by the end of it, because like I said, I had never had an experience where I had to throw these baits and catch fish on it in a very small selection of, lures to choose from. So once all the pieces of the puzzle kind of ended up getting all put together, it was a really cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those guys in Japan, at least, they caught more than one fish, so they were probably pretty stoked out there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, no, they were stoked. And I mean, that's another thing that I thought was so cool about this trip is I had never, you know, you don't get the opportunity very often. Most people never will, but I'd never fished with somebody from Japan or anybody really that had like a any sort of a language barrier. These guys don't speak perfect English by any means. One of them, is pretty fluent. He can definitely understand everything you're saying and talk to you. It's a little bit broken. And then one of the other guys is much more quiet. Doesn't speak quite as much English as the other guy. So it was really cool to almost like communicate through bass fishing and just to see like the pure excitement these guys had catching fish was so cool. I think that's one of the things that does kind of sadly get lost in a lot of tournament anglers is we do it so competitively that like just the pure joy of just catching a fish that most people experience kind of gets lost for us. To see these guys that don't tournament fish, they rarely get out and fish off of a boat, to like watch them get a blow up from a 5-pounder like way back in the willow trees, and they're like wrenching this thing out, yelling. It was such a cool experience to watch that happen.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that same sentiment from quite a few people that have done the tournament bass fishing. Is a lot of times you guys kind of go through lulls or maybe even take a break from the sport because you kind of forget like why we're here. It kind of like stops being about like, hey, I want to go out and catch fish. I want to have fun. I want to break my PB. I want to do whatever I'm doing. It's like you said, you start getting stressed out. Hey, I'm not catching them. I'm not on them. I have this money on the line, whatever the case is. That could be something that you definitely have to kind of work through just overall in a career of trying to tournament bass fish.
Definitely. Yeah, that has happened, a couple times to me where like you get a couple bad events in a row or it's just, you're traveling all over the place. I mean, it beats you up driving all over the place, all over the West Coast, trying to catch fish. And yeah, you kind of lose that, which is, and that's the whole reason everybody that I know got into bass fishing. It's not because they wanted to be a tournament bass fisherman. It's everybody started because they just wanted to go out and catch fish. And then, the ones of us that have that competitive nature end up going in the bass fishing route, and somewhere down that road, those lines kind of get blurred and it becomes so much of a just pure competition that you forget that you're out there just, enjoying life and what kind of nature has to offer. So that's one thing, definitely a takeaway that I had from that trip. And I've kind of thought about that before, especially, you get out on some of these places that are just so gorgeous. And I just, kind of take a minute every day now when I'm out there on a lake, wherever it is, to just kind of remind myself how lucky I am and how cool of an experience it is just to go out and be able to bass fish and do what you love. So, that's something I think a lot more people should try and remember, especially, the next time you're having a bad tournament, you just want to go put your boat on the trailer, just, take a second, soak up what's going on and, kind of remind yourself that you're there to have fun. Unless you're one of these guys who's putting food on the table solely from bass fishing, a lot of this is just because, you want to get out there and enjoy the experience.
No, for sure. I think that's something I definitely think about all the time. I'm not fishing tournaments, but just, boat breaks down or whatever's going on, you can get kind of bent out of shape, but just, there's a lot of people that don't even get that opportunity to float around and kind of have those vibes fishing. So I definitely can understand that. I know for myself, I definitely want to check out Whiplash after this. What are some baits, at least from what you saw, that really stood out that you think people should probably check out?
So they one of their main baits that they have is it's called the Swayward 16, and it's a glide bait. I think it's 6.5 inches long, and it comes in. They have 8 different colors that they call their overseas colors. So a lot of the stuff to match our fisheries just all across the country. They got like bluegill, a shad pattern, and a bunch of other stuff, bait fish styles, a bone color. If you're a striper guy, they got one of those. and then they make a select couple of colors. I think they call them the like USA special colors. I might be messing that up, but they have a California kokanee and a Clear Lake hitch, which they actually worked with Clear Lake Outdoors on designing those colors.
Oh, wow.
So they're specifically made for our fisheries out here. So those are two really cool colors. And they also make those same colors in their jerkbait, which is called the Thunder Buck Ram, or TBR. They kind of abbreviate it sometimes. But their jerkbait's awesome. And then they have those 5 topwater baits. And the 5 topwater baits just come in the kind of original 8 colors that I spoke about, bluegill, shad patterns, all that kind of stuff. But I think my favorite one from the trip, or 2 favorite from the trip, were definitely that Swayward 16. We caught a ton of glide bait fish. Clear Lake's pretty famous for, throwing those swim baits. So it was really fun to catch them on that. And then their small topwater, they have one called the Flutter and Wire, which is it's kind of a prop bait with like a little bit of a blade on the bottom. And it's just like a really good like bluegill imitator when you're, a lot of those fish right now on Clear Lake, or a lot of the bluegill on Clear Lake right now, are spawning. So they're up in those tules making their beds. And this was like a perfect little imitation, just a little bite-sized snack. And I think our biggest fish of the trip ended up coming on that. And I mean, it's just fun catching them on top water. So I would definitely recommend checking these things out. Not just, no sales pitch involved, but they did catch a lot of fish. You guys will see it in the video. And we'll have them in Fisherman's Warehouse pretty soon. They're on their way from Japan right now. We do have a couple of we do have the jerkbait and the glide bait in those California colors, but we're waiting on the rest of the stuff to show up.
Nice. Well, yeah, I'll throw a link down to Fisherman's just so you guys can find that if you're interested. I know I'm gonna check it out. I always love anything from Japan. I think a lot of the Japanese are elite when it comes to designing stuff and getting some original products out there. And I'm always looking for something different to show the fish.
Definitely, yeah. It's something new that they haven't seen before, and they do get bites.
No, right? I mean, yeah, we're gonna see the video soon. Hey, I have a selfish question for myself, and
totally.
I want to say it was this year. You can correct me if it wasn't, but I'm pretty sure me and you both caught a 9-pound bass from Folsom Lake this year.
That is, well, technically I caught mine on December, I think it was December 28th of last year, right before this year, but we could call it this year. Within the last 365 days, I did catch a 9 on Folsom. Yes.
Perfect. And I'm pretty sure that was your personal best, right?
It was not, actually. I had a 9.5 out of Clear Lake before that, and then I did catch a 10.5 out of Clear Lake this year too. So,
oh man, so this guy's taking off.
He's in 3rd place right now, but I do kind of consider. I think I do consider this 9-pounder at Folsom more impressive than those 2 fish, because a 10 at Clear Lake is, it's great. It's a double digit still, but a 9 at Folsom is like catching a teener anywhere else, I feel like.
No, I agree. I don't know if there's anything about that story with that fish that you thought was interesting. I know I'll mention something about mine in a second.
Yeah, that was a really interesting fish. You probably know who I was fishing with, Daniel Baldini. He was one of the kids who was in the club with us.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, him and his twin brother Tony were in the club. But anyways, yeah, we were out just fun fishing. He, doesn't bass fish that much anymore, but every time he comes home, he's always like, dude, we got to go. So I'm like, all right, I got a free day. You're in town. Let's go hit the lake and, just go fun fish. And we went out there, and I do kind of feel bad for him. He had been throwing. I had him set up on a Vision 110 Junior for he threw it like relentlessly. I was like, dude, it'll happen at some point. You'll catch one on it. And I think he caught a couple small ones on it, and he finally puts it down. And I pick it up for like 5 minutes, and we're fishing the spot. And I'm like, all right, we're gonna just like troll down this one bank. I was fishing in between 2 spots. I had one rock pile, and then there was like 200 yards of mud bank, and then another rock pile. And I'm like, rather than starting the main motor, we're just going to troll down this and just kind of like, BS fish our way through this little patch. It's legit a mud flat where we were at. Like there's like 2 stumps on it maybe. And I'm throwing the jerk bait that he'd been throwing all day. And I make this bomb of a cast, and I'm ripping it. And like I said, I'm fishing fast, not paying attention, not live scoping or anything. And all of a sudden I just like go to, rip it, and it just stops. And I'm like, dude, did I really manage to catch like the one of 2 stumps that are on this stretch? And then all of a sudden I just felt that like first like head shake, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, like it's not a, it's not a snag. So I start reeling. I'm like, dude, this one's pretty good. Like, you might need to like get ready to like grab this thing because I didn't have my net in my boat. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. And all of a sudden it jumps, and we both like lose it. We're like, oh my God, dude! Like, I'm like, dude, it's like a double digit. Like, you got to grab this thing, bro. And I'm like freaking out. Comes up and jumps again. And mind you, this is on that little Vision 110, so there's like tiny little treble hooks on there. And anyways, comes up next to the side of the boat, and my Daniel just takes his hands and just puts both hands straight into its mouth, like. And this thing had the jerk bait like basically laid flat over its bottom jaw. It wasn't coming off. Like, no way in hell this thing was getting off. But it was like he basically just like put his hands over the treble and like death gripped this thing and put it in the boat. And we both just started freaking out because that's probably one of the biggest fish I've ever even really seen on Folsom, let alone had like an opportunity to actually catch the thing. So it was a really cool experience. And, one of those other times where it's like just so cool to like share that experience with somebody who you're friends with rather than, doing it in a tournament where you don't really get to like soak the whole thing in. So it was a really fun, fun fish catch.
No, for sure. I mean, when I saw that post, I was so hyped for you because what you said is like, we know, and for those of you guys that don't fish Folsom, like, if you're catching big largies out there, it's a special deal. And especially like you said, to catch it kind of like not at random, but like when you're not expecting it, I can't imagine seeing that thing like wallow up out of the water with that jerkbait in your mouth. I'd be puckered up thinking about that thing shaking around with that thing in its mouth.
Dude, I definitely was. I mean, thankfully I changed all my treble hooks out, put the owners on it, and those things held up. But they definitely, because you never know how good they're hooked when they first come up. And I've definitely hooked big fish, in the 7 to 10 pound category before. And I've lost fish of that quality, numerous times just because you don't hook them good and they have so much power when they come up, and especially when they get out of the water. So I was freaking out until the thing was laying on the bottom of the boat. And then I was freaking out again for another reason.
Yeah. I mean, they like to do it dirty. I had one of my last Delta trips was one of those weird days where you're just, punching rats and it's just nothing's really added up. And I came over to this little bank and there were some hydrillomats kind of on the edge on low tide, and they didn't really seem deep enough. And I was kind of like, I'm kind of like almost at the end of the day, I'm just going to flip this stuff for like no reason. Basically, I'm just next to the ramp and I'm flipping, and I go to lift up and it's heavy, and I crack this fish and it just doesn't move. And then next thing I know, it's under the boat on the other side of me. And I'm like, oh my God. And it just comes off. And like you said, it was one of those things where like, when you've caught a couple fish like that and you crack the whip on them and you feel that, you're like, okay, this is like a giant. Yeah. It's a giant.
Yeah, your heart like sinks in like a good way. You're like, oh my God, what do I have?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I just filmed a video actually yesterday. I think it just got posted talking about that exactly, of especially on the Delta. And I'm sure you can attest to this. Any cast really could be a giant out there, and you just don't know until you crack back, and you just hope that whatever it is that you're holding in your hand is something they're going to stay pegged to, because they're going to try to play dirty out there for sure.
Yeah. Yep. That place in Clear Lake have given me plenty of heartbreaks before. So, but I do have to selfishly ask you now about your 9-pounder, because I haven't heard your story yet. So sorry to your listeners if they've already heard this, but I do want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the story goes, I've been throwing the big baits for probably,
I've noticed that,
I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years, and I've seen a lot, and I know a lot of people that throw big baits have seen a lot too. And I kind of made a decision the last 2 winters. I was like, you know what? We're going for it. Like, I don't care. We're just throwing the big baits, and we're going to see what happens. And I ended up sticking an 879. I think it was in like 2022, I think, or something. And that was a 10. That fish was a 10. It just wasn't a 10 when I caught it. And it was probably 25 inches long. The head, it's the biggest fish I've ever seen. And I actually had pulled up on this point. I was throwing a big trout soft bait and 10-inch bait. and I threw this bait out, and the day before I had 2 probably over 10 follow it in, like giants. And I was like, bro, there's no way that these fish are on this point right now. So I go home, I get all my stuff all ironed and pressed out. It's all looking nice, fresh knots, fresh hooks, everything. And I said, I'm going to go back to this point. It was like 3:00 in the afternoon when I saw these fish. I'm like, I'm going to go back to this point first light, right when the sun comes up, and I'm going to throw this swim bait. I'm going to make the exact same cast I make. So I went out, exact same cast, halfway to the boat, bonk, it's at 879. I don't know if it was one of those big ones, probably not. I think it was a different fish, but it was post-spawn. And then next year goes by, I catch one that's like 845 on a very similar spot. Same thing, trout, swim bait, soft bait, whole 9 yards. And then fast forward to this year when I caught this fish. So I really believe, and I'm sure you can attest to it, that some spots in the lake just have big ones on it. It doesn't matter the water level, doesn't matter what's going on. Like, they're just associated to that area. And I had seen some fish on this point that were big. They were big, like 8+. And they're those fish where you see them and they never really come quite high enough in the water column, and they're just down there, and it's just this black blob, and you're like, that's a big one. So I pull up to this point. I had some followers on it, but something wasn't right. And I actually came back to it that same day when it started to rain and the wind started to blow. And for those of you guys that haven't seen that video, I'll link it in the description. But I pretty much call this fish like into existence. I bomb my cast out, and I'm like, this is the cast. The wind's pushing me. Like, everything's perfect. Boat's dead silent. I got the graphs turned off. Like, we're stealth mode. And I get this swim bait all the way back to the boat, past like the breaking point, which that's not one of my theories. That's one of Mike Gilbert's swim bait theories, if you guys want to hear about it. But basically what he talks about is fish get used to following your bait, especially a swim bait, a certain distance. And if you can bring that bait past that breaking point, that fish is not going to know what to do, because every time they followed these baits they're not sure about, they always disappear and they go in your boat, right? So now you have this cast where maybe it's a little abnormally long, or you're positioning yourself between the fish and the bait. And that's a little nugget I'll throw out for people listening. If you can set up on a point in a way to where your bait hits the bank before it hits your boat, that's a special thing. And what I mean specifically by that is, when you reel in, that fish is going to follow your bait all the way till when it sees the boat, and then it's done. If you can find a way to cast over a spot, and your bait will essentially like hit the dirt of the point and never actually interact with your boat, I think that can trigger bites. And pretty much what happened was, I had this little rock pile that I knew that my bait was essentially going to like run dry on the top of this rock pile. So I got it all the way to the point where I literally thought, like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen right now. And then I just got destroyed. And it was that 9-pounder. And that fish was awesome. Probably sitting in like 4 feet of water. And I don't think that fish was there the whole time. I think that fish was probably staged somewhere on the point pre-spawn. And she followed it all the way to where there was nowhere left. That my bait, which was a trout, had nowhere left to swim. The only place it had to go was onto shore. And she smashed it. And I still think about it, like that bite. It was just one of those things where like everything was perfect. And I think a lot of that kind of goes into it with those big ones. Like, you're not just catching those things on any day. It kind of has to be like the day, whether it's the moon, the wind, the rain, the overcast. Like, they really want everything to be set up to make that mistake. And that's kind of the story with that. But I really haven't caught anything. I have a 970 from the Delta on a crankbait, and then everything else I've caught over 8's been on a swim bait. Nothing's been unconventional. Dang. So when you tell me that story about catching that fish on a rip bait, I know how I felt when I caught that fish on a crankbait, and I was very scared. I can't imagine having 3 size 8 treble hooks on a Vision 110 and that thing flopping around.
Yeah, that was a little dicey for sure, but yeah, she came in the boat, so I was happy.
No, that's awesome. So, hey, I know, like we talked about, you have a lot of people supporting you. You got some pretty awesome relationships that you've built throughout this whole journey. Kind of talk us through who's kind of on Luke's team right now and who's supporting you.
Yeah. One of my new ones for this year, bigger one that I was really excited to have the opportunity to be with was Daiwa. Everybody knows the name Daiwa. They're, one of the OG rod and reel brands around, and, arguably, kind of that top two, them and Shimano are, button heads all the time. So I've worked with them for a number of years, in the buying role, and, got to meet, kind of the right people over there, and it kind of blossomed into this, this sponsorship opportunity with them that I got to take advantage of. And that's been really cool to work with a company of that size and to promote some like really cool products that I really believe in too. That's one of the big things that I've always felt with my sponsorships is I will not put anybody's logo on any of my stuff if I don't believe wholeheartedly in their stuff. So working with Daiwa has been super fun. I've been running their Kage line of rods, which I know a lot of people probably don't know about. They're kind of a little bit more under the radar. The Kages they're actually a dealer only rod, or a brick and mortar dealer only rod. So you can actually only buy these things in a physical store. You can't order them online. And they've recently added a like Kage reel to go with it. So they're really cool looking rods. If you go on my social media, you guys can see what they look like, but it's been really cool to just, have that opportunity, work with a company like that and be using awesome gear, obviously. My rods were definitely needing an update when I came onto this. So that was a nice thing to be able to walk into. And then I'm with a number of other companies. We've got Yamamoto, which I've been with. I think they're my longest standing sponsor at the moment. Came on with them in like 2020. So that's been really cool to keep working with them even through the transition over to GSM. And then through that, I added Cuda Tools and RoboWorm, obviously, two brands that, speak for themselves, especially West Coast guys knowing that RoboWorm name. You can never have too many packs of those things in the boat. And then, I work for Fisherman's and, also promote them. So they're on the boat and all that stuff. And then Buck and Bass has been great. That's one thing, little side note and not too sales pitchy, but an honest thing is being protected in the sun. I know we're going into summer right now. I started wearing sun gloves and a sun shirt. Now, whether you buy Buck and Bass versions of those is up to you, but it is really important. I mean, I was to the point where I'd go out and I'd get so sunburnt. My hands were peeling and, face was peeling and all this stuff. And I started wearing, a sun hoodie and sun gloves, and I wear those nonstop now. I will not get on the water in the summertime without those things, or I'll just like fry myself. So make sure you're taking care of your body. Like my parents always tell me, you don't want to be old and wrinkly and have skin cancer when you're like 60. So, I've been taking that upon myself to try to be better about that. And then CNC Marine, I've been with them for a long time. They've always supported me, and it's a great place to go. If you need your boat worked on or you're buying a new boat, those guys up there have always taken great care of me. So I got to give them a shout.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that's no secret. Any of those companies you just talked about. I mean, I've actually found myself not even talking to you, but just in general switching to all Daiwa. I just think like for the price, especially that like $200-ish price range, I think their equipment's top notch. And Buck and Bass, I actually have one of their rain jackets, which is literally the craziest thing ever. I mean, I still can't get over it. It's quite an investment, but I've had mine for I think 3 years now, and I mean, there's just nothing even close to that jacket, especially with the ceiling wrist cuffs. I mean, like this whole swim bait thing. I fish in the rain a lot. I never don't fish for like weather unless it's like blowing 50 miles an hour. I love fishing in the rain, and I think it's because of that jacket. Honestly, is I don't get wet, so there's not really a reason to not be out there.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I bought my rain suit before I was on with Buck and Bass. I bought that suit, outside of my sponsorship before I was affiliated with them in any way. And I would gladly do it again. I spend one wet day on Shasta with a co-angler, and we get in at the end of the day and I'm dry, and, he has whatever rain suit and he's not dry. And I'll tell you, that is the easiest way to sell a rain suit. You go out and get in that kind of an element, whether it's hail or rain and stuff, for 8 hours in a day, and you're really going to wish, it doesn't matter if the rain suit was $10,000, you're going to wish you spent the money on it.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, we talk about all the different aspects that go into fishing tournaments. If your mind is not right because you're cold and you're sad and you're all these different things, I mean, your whole day is going to be thrown off as a result of that.
Yeah, that's the other big thing. When you're paying, the entry fees that tournament anglers are paying too, you do not want to have any distraction, whether it's your comfortability or, your reel or line or whatever it is. You got to make sure that all of your stuff is on point.
No, for sure. Well, hey, Luke, I really appreciate you coming on. I think there's a lot of good information in here for a lot of young anglers and really anyone in general. And I hope that maybe down the road, as you win some more tournaments, we can have you back on and talk about some of those events in the future.
I like the sound of that. So hopefully I better pick up the pace a little bit. The last event was a little rough for me, but, we'll try to bounce back and get a win. We'll come back and recap it with you.
Awesome, man. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
All right, later.